And Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Welcome. I hope this finds you in good health and secure. We are beginning. Wow, mouths already. Part 2 of the opening of the eyes, which is an entire Go show written about Gohonzon. Gohonzon is the opening of the eyes, not these eyes, the mental eye, the eye of perception, cognition, understanding, knowledge, everything that we experience in our tendencies and conditions, our freight train of instantiated energy as a focal point, if you will, of the engine of life. The entire universe is doing this, but only this rare opportunity. Look at the size of the universe. You can't. It's just too immense. And yet, you, little tiny you, and me, just little, we are instantiations of all of that energy in such a form, in such a combination of tendencies and conditions, that we have been offered in our potential an emergent property that no other combination of energy, molecules, atoms, quarks, so on and so forth, combined, amalgamated into a system that produces a sentient mind. How rare is that? That we can look upon, witness, experience the very nature of all things, the very nature of this process of formations into instantiation. But from our tiny little vantage point, it's very easy to miss that this is occurring moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. That it's not just poof, here we are. It's a poof, 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 poof. It's a constant poofing of being. Whoa, 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 wait a minute. That changes everything, doesn't it? That's the opening of the eye. Because the samsaric eye has a very narrow, small vantage point and perceives everything as though here it is. From nothing there is something, and that something never goes away. I have some of that. Me is some of that. But the truth is, that's not what's happening. Me isn't something. Me is meing. Me, 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 me. I'm witnessing meing. We know this. That's why we perceive, but it takes longer for us to perceive it. Aging. What is aging? Is meing. Right? Nobody needs to tell you you're no longer crapping in a diaper. Right? You're not that me anymore. And tomorrow, well, my analogy falls apart the older we get. But sorry. Anyway, point is, we have examples, but we're slow on the uptake. We still continue to identify with stuff. And what we should be identifying is our being, our manifesting. Because if we shift our minds toward understanding that, perceiving that, then we understand how certain behaviors we've developed are unnecessary. In fact, are the very cause of our stress, anxiety, quote, suffering. This is the opening of the Buddha eye. It's the story of what is Gohonzon, the eye we are wanting to instantiate, stay in. Samsara is all well and good, but we need to change our perspective, the way we understand life. The opening of the eyes. From this time forward, the great bodhisattvas, as well as Brahma, Shakra, the gods of the sun and moon, the four heavenly kings, became the disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of teachings. So what does that mean? Exactly what I was just saying. When we change our perspective, our mind of understanding, of witnessing, to include all of the, quote, forces of nature, when we see clearly how all of the actions in the universe are occurring contemporaneously, that all life is happening in the moments, then all of these other conceptualizations, personifications, gods, deities, forces, whatever you want to call them, when you finally reduce them to their energetic component that is instantiating from potential all the time, they all fall under the rubric of Buddha, or the label Buddha that we give to this clarity of understanding. Right? Buddha's not a person. Once you unglue your mind from that perception and understand that Buddha is another name for the engine of life. But Buddha specifically as a label is our perception of, our knowing of, our being within the concept of the engine of life. That's something very unique to the sentient mind. Right? The moon doesn't know it. It's just mooning. Like the galaxy is galaxying. The universe is universing. It has no consciousness about it, but the sentient mind, our unique, tiny little opportunity. Look at this. Witnessing. That is Buddha, and that first consciousness, the ninth consciousness, that's Gohonzon. That's Gohonzon. When you watch those videos or read about the ninth consciousness, it's identified as the Amala consciousness. The ninth consciousness is Myoho Renge Kyo. Well, what is Myoho Renge Kyo? It is the Gohonzon, the instantiation, the invocation, the opening of the eye of seeing the actual truth, what is actually happening. All these names and labels, all talking about this one thing, the RenGe. So that's why they became disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha, right? Brahma didn't sit down on his knees and kiss Shakyamuni's feet. No. The concept Brahma, the life force, the mana, all these labels, all these concepts, they fall under the opening of the eyes. You see? Thus, in the treasure shower chapter, where we get it, of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha treats these great bodhisattvas as his disciples, admonishing and instructing them in these words, quote, "So I say to the great assembly, all minds, all sentient minds, after I have passed into extinction, who can guard and uphold, read and recite this sutra? Who will propagate this truth, this knowing? Now in the presence of the Buddha, let him come forward and speak his vow," end quote. Who's going to commit to this? Now that you know. This was the solemn way he addressed them. Then, among the great bodhisattvas, it was, quote, "as though a great wind were tossing the branches of small trees," end quote. Oh, now that you know it, somebody has to take responsibility for it. Yeah, we've all been in moments like that, haven't we? When the teacher in class says, "Okay, it's time for book reports. Who's next?" Ah! Right? That moment. Like the kusha grass bending before a great wind, or like rivers and streams drawn to the great ocean, so were they drawn to the Buddha. The Buddha, not the man, the Buddha, the mind, wow, what does that really entail? Oh yeah, I know all about it, but what does it take to get there? What does it take to be there? But it was still a relatively short time since the Buddha had begun to preach the Lotus Sutra on Eagle Peak, and what he said seemed to his listeners dreamlike and unreal. Really? We can do that? Like you did that? Where are you going? Right? They still weren't quite getting it. The treasure tower had first appeared to confirm the correctness of the theoretical teaching in the first half of the Lotus Sutra, and after the treasure tower prepared the way to the expounding of the essential teaching in the latter half, the Buddhas of the 10 directions gathered in assembly, Shakyamuni Buddha announcing that all of these were emanations of himself. There is no difference. Buddha is Buddha is Buddha. These are all invented others to be examples, pathways for you to get this singular truth. Still, the language of it confuses people, yeah? The treasure tower hung in the air. Namo Myo Renge Kyo, the scroll behind me, captures this moment. With Shakyamuni and many treasures seated in it side by side, as though both the sun and moon had appeared side by side in the blue sky. Do you see how he constructed this mandala? It is the story of this ceremony in the sky. The mandala is representing the treasure tower in its main, middle, focal point construction, supported by all of these other concepts within the teaching of Shakyamuni, yeah? But that is a representation of the treasure tower that you and I manifest when we invoke it, the truth. And that opens our eye, Gohonzon, in mind, to our witnessing experience, yes? But he's describing the construction of the ceremony in the sky just as he's describing it in this mandala. The treasure tower hung in the air with Shakyamuni and many treasures seated in it side by side, as though both the sun and the moon had appeared in the side by side in the blue sky. The great assembly of human and heavenly beings were clustered in the sky like stars. And the Buddhas, who were emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha, were on the ground, seated on their lion seats under the jeweled trees. This is, if you go online, go to threefoldlotus.com, take a look or download this book on the Gohonzon map, you'll see how he constructed this mandala. It's a representation of this teaching. In the Lotus Treasury world described in the Flower Garland Sutra, the Buddhas in their reward bodies all dwell in their separate lands. Buddhas of other worlds do not come to this world and call themselves emanations, as happened in the case of the Lotus Sutra, nor do Buddhas of this world go to other worlds. Only Dharma wisdom and the other great bodhisattvas come and go. As for the 9 honored ones on the 8-petaled lotus and the 37 honored ones described respectively in the Mahavarachana and the Diamond Crown Sutras, although they appear to be transformation bodies of the thus come one, Mahavarachana, they are not Buddhas enlightened since the remote past or endowed with the 3 bodies. In other words, they're provisional teachings about attaining Buddhahood, without the key understanding that what is being witnessed in Buddha is time without beginning, is the engine of life without the confines of an era or time. That it is a constant aspect, the true aspect of all phenomena, this instantiation from potential, which is limitless. The 1,000 Buddhas described in the larger Wisdom Sutra and the Buddhas of the 6 directions represented in the Amida Sutra never assembled in this world as did the Buddha's emanations in the Lotus Sutra. He's pointing to the uniqueness of this teaching, right? The Buddhas who assembled when the Great Collection Sutra was preached were not emanations of Shakyamuni. The 4 Buddhas of the 4 directions depicted in the Gold Light Sutra are transformation bodies of Shakyamuni Buddha. Thus, in the various sutras other than the Lotus Sutra, the Myoho Renge Kyo, Shakyamuni does not assemble Buddhas who carry out different austerities and practices and who possess 3 bodies, nor does he identify them as emanations of himself. Those were expedient means, right? Only in the Treasure Tower chapter of the Lotus Sutra does he do so. This chapter, then, is intended as an introduction to the lifespan chapter that follows later. Shakyamuni Buddha, who was believed to have attained enlightenment for the first time only some 40 years previously, calls together Buddhas who had become enlightened as long as 1 or even 10 kalpas ago, and declares that they are all emanations of himself. This is a far cry indeed from the Buddha's usual preaching on the equality of all Buddhas in their Dharma bodies, and in fact a cause of great astonishment. Right? He's been teaching for 40 years that there's other Buddhas like me. See, he's using their attachment to his Shakyamuni status and saying there have been other, but what he was saying and not being heard is that there have been others who have accomplished this awakening, as I have. Look at the path they took. Look at the way they influenced people. But all of those are stories. And for him to say that all of them now are emanations of himself, quote unquote, he's not talking about Shakyamuni the man. He's talking about this process of opening the eyes, of awakening. Buddha is not him. Buddha is a state of knowing, experiencing, yes? This is a far cry from the Buddha's usual preaching, yeah. If Shakyamuni had attained enlightenment for the first time only some 40 years earlier, there could hardly have been so many beings in the 10 directions who had received his instruction, his being Shakyamuni, right? Buddha exists as long as sentient minds exist. But it wasn't Shakyamuni who taught these other personages that he created for the purposes of teaching. But people are still confused. They want to believe those are men. But they're really talking about this spark, this treasure tower, this RenGe, this awakening. And even if he was privileged to possess emanations, there would have been no benefit in his showing them to his listeners. Why would you share your imaginings and your understanding of different pathways to enlightenment? Of what purpose would that be? Well, obviously, to teach. But still, they just were wrestling with the entire idea, right? Because they felt betrayed in a way. Just because when you're ignorant, you don't understand, right? Tendai, describing what went on in the astonished minds of the assembly, says, "It was evident to them that Shakyamuni Buddha possessed numerous emanations. Therefore, they understood that he must have attained enlightenment in the far distant past." So they started to put these qualities, these supernatural properties on Shakyamuni the man, as though he just changed form right in front of them, that he must have lived in the past life, right? Because you're dealing with Indian mythology here. That's much easier. Let's go mystical. Let's go magical with it. Wow, Bob's telling us that he's been Bob since time immemorial. Wow, we're witnessing Bob here. No, you're not getting it. Bob's talking about the enlightenment. The Buddha doesn't belong to Bob. It's just something Bob figured out. And any one of us can figure it out because it's always been there, waiting to be witnessed. The witnessing is Buddha. It's still resistance, yeah? Hard to understand. In addition, the great bodhisattvas, as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds, appeared rising up out of the ground. Not a single missing sentient mind. Every sentient mind, past, present, and future, if you must consider it that way, the potential for sentient mind, wherever and whenever it instantiates. Do you see how that reads differently if you understand it that way? Sentient mind is sentient mind. Time does not bear on sentient mind. The potential of sentient mind to perceive, to awaken to Buddha, it has no time. It's the perception in the now into the next now. That's where Buddha is, yeah? Even Universal Worthy and Manjushri, who had been regarded as the leading disciples of Shakyamuni, could not compare to them. The great bodhisattvas present in the assemblies, described in the sutras of the flower garland, correct and equal, and wisdom periods, and the treasure tower chapter of the Lotus Sutra, or Vajrasattva, and the rest of the 16 great bodhisattvas of the Mahavarachana and Diamond Crown Sutras, when compared with these newly arrived bodhisattvas, that's you and I, by the way, seemed like a pack of apes or monkeys, with the new bodhisattvas appearing among them like so many chakras. This is the great respect and responsibility put on you and I as bodhisattvas who come into being in this time period, we are completely responsible for this teaching remaining and spreading throughout Jambudvipa. No one else will do it. Shakyamuni ain't here, and no one has replaced his great insight and teaching abilities. It falls on you and I. So Nichiren tells us to emulate him, but as he is an emulation of Shakyamuni, we are encouraged and supported and taught by Nichiren's doctrine on how to be bodhisattvas like Shakyamuni, to propagate Buddha-ness, yeah? It was as though great ministers of court had mingled with humble mountain folk. Even Maitreya, who was to be the next Buddha after Shakyamuni, in other words, the next human embodiment of Buddhahood on this planet, was perplexed by them, to say nothing of the lesser personages in the assembly. The lesser personages in the assembly. Among these great bodhisattvas, as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds, there were 4 great sages called superior practices, boundless practices, pure practices, and firmly established practices. Do you not see in that naming convention exactly the qualities that we are to emulate in order to lead our own practice? Right? We're playing the word game, but it's purposeful. In the presence of these 4, the other bodhisattvas, suspended in the air or seated on Eagle Peak, could not bear to gaze on them face to face or begin to fathom their dignity. Such was the nature of their leadership, right? Their embodiment of the principles of Buddha-ness. Hard for us to imagine. Even the 4 bodhisattvas of the Flower Garland Sutra, the 4 bodhisattvas of the Mahavarachana Sutra, or the 16 great bodhisattvas of the Diamond Crown Sutra, when in the presence of these 4, were like bleary-eyed men trying to peer at the sun, or like humble fishermen appearing in an audience before the emperor. These 4 were like Tai Kuang Wang and others of the 4 sages in ancient China, who towered above the multitude. They were like the 4 white-haired elders of the Mount Shang, who assisted Emperor Hui. Solemn, dignified, they were beings of great and lofty stature. Aside from Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the emanations of Shakyamuni from the 10 directions, they were worthy of being good friends upon whom all beings could rely. Remember the definition of good friends in Buddhism, yeah? People who support your practice. Who support the practice of opening of the eyes. Then Bodhisattva Maitreya began to consider the matter in his mind. He said to himself, since the time of Shakyamuni Buddha was a crowned prince, and during the 42 years since he gained enlightenment at the age of 30, up until this gathering of Eagle Peak, I have known all the bodhisattvas in this world, and all the great bodhisattvas who have come from the worlds of the 10 directions to attend the assemblies. Moreover, I have visited the pure and impure lands of the 10 directions, sometimes as the Buddha's emissary, at other times on my own initiative, and I have become acquainted with all the great bodhisattvas of those various lands. As for these great bodhisattvas who've appeared from under the earth, what kind of Buddha is their teacher? Right? They're in the future. I've never seen them. What Buddha is teaching them? Still, and this is why Maitreya isn't ready yet, doesn't get that Buddha ain't a man. This is the whole drop the mic moment of the lifespan chapter, right? Understand the lifespan isn't a human lifespan. The lifespan is the universe span lifespan. Life is the universe. Surely he must be a Buddha who is incomparably superior to Shakyamuni. This guy. Many treasures and the emanation Buddhas from the 10 directions. From the fury of rain, we can judge the greatness of the dragon that caused it to fall. From the size of the lotus flower, we can tell the depth of the pond that produced it. Now, from what land did these great bodhisattvas come? What Buddha did they follow? And what great teaching have they practiced? It must be beyond what Shakyamuni's telling us. No, Maitreya, you egomaniac. I mean, he's describing the situation, the story of the Lotus Sutra. If you've read the Lotus Sutra, surely you recognize that Nichiren is interpolating the dialogue, the story of the Lotus Sutra itself, yeah? Thus did Bodhisattva Maitreya wonder to himself, becoming so puzzled that he was unable to utter a sound. But perhaps through the Buddha's power, he was at last able to put his doubt into words, right? When he finally raised up the courage to ask Shakyamuni in the Lotus Sutra, "What you talking about, Willis?" Right? Quote, "Immeasurable 1,000, 10,000, millions, a great host of bodhisattvas such as was never seen in the past," so on and so forth. This host of bodhisattvas with their great dignity, virtue, and diligence, who preached the law for them? Right? If not you, then who? You've only lived 40-some years. So it wasn't you. Who taught and converted them and brought them to this? Under whom did they first set their minds on enlightenment? What Buddha's law do they praise and complain? Must be different than what you're teaching. World-honored one, from times past I have seen nothing like this. I'm begging you to tell me where they come from, the name of the land. I have constantly journeyed from land to land, but never have I seen such a thing. In this whole multitude, there is not one person that I know. Suddenly, they have come up from the earth. I beg you to explain the cause. How'd they get here? Well, Shakyamuni must have sat back on his haunches and thought, this is all I've been talking about for my whole life. Where the hell have you been? Right? So that's a paraphrasing of Maitreya's statement in the Lotus Sutra. But Tendai comments on this, and he says, quote, "Since the time of the Buddha's enlightenment at the place of meditation up until the present gathering, great bodhisattvas unceasingly came from the worlds in the 10 directions to attend the various assemblies," right? This is all of the sutra stories. "Their numbers are unlimited, but I, with the wisdom and power appropriate to the next Buddha," speaking for Maitreya, "have been able to see and know every single one of them. I've understood all of these teachings," that's what he's really saying. "And yet, among the newly arrived multitude, I do not know a single person. After studying with you for 40 years, understanding all these personages and mindsets and mental capacities, now you drop this unlimited number of mental awakenings. Who are they? Where did they learn? Who was their teacher? Or will be their teacher, right? Because they're from the future. This in spite of the fact that I've traveled in the 10 directions, have served the various Buddhas, and am well known among their audiences, right? I'm no stranger to this practice, these teachings. He still hasn't understood the critical point, though. That's not just about being well-versed and well-read and knowing all the teachings. It's about experiencing the awakening. That's what it's always been about. But you know how human beings are, right? We get attached to words, rituals, things. Miao Lo commented on this, quote, "Wise men can perceive the cause of things as snakes know the way of snakes." But you're not getting outside of that. The meaning of these passages of scripture, text, and commentary is perfectly clear, Nichiren offers. In effect, from the time of Shakyamuni's enlightenment up until the present assembly on Eagle Peak in this land and in all the lands of the 10 directions, Bodhisattva Maitreya had never seen or heard of these bodhisattvas who came forth from the earth, future. Of course. The Buddha, replying to Maitreya's doubts, said, quote, "Ajita." That's his name for Maitreya. "These bodhisattvas that I now pour out in this teaching before you, these future bodhisattvas, whom you have never seen before in the past, when I had attained supreme perfect enlightenment in this Saha world, I converted and guided these bodhisattvas, trained their minds, and caused them to develop a longing for the way." Now here's that problem with identifying with Shakyamuni again. A man having taught for 40 years, when do you have time to do all that, right? He also said, "When I was in the vicinity of the city of Gaya, seated beneath the Bodhi tree, I trained the highest, the correct enlightenment, and turned the wheel of the unsurpassed law. Therefore, or thereafter, I taught and converted them." Wait a minute. "And caused them for the first time to set their minds on the way. Now all of them dwell in the stage of non-regression. Ever since the long distance past, I've been teaching and converting this multitude." Now, it may be because of translation, but we understand what he's saying. He's saying, what I was teaching from the moment I attained enlightenment is the very teaching that instructed these bodhisattvas and all bodhisattvas throughout all time. The unsaid text there is, it's not dependent upon me. It's not that I attained this enlightenment that started with me under the Bodhi tree and that I've been teaching for 40 years. What I attained was something that has always been potentially available to all sentient minds. Therefore, sentient minds from the inconceivable past and into the inconceivable future have the same potential. You and I. Our enlightenment is not dependent upon Shakyamuni. Do you see the disconnect that has to happen there? Oh, this isn't your teaching. It's your elucidations and teachings about something that's far more profound than you. It's not an invention of yours. It's just something you became aware of. Yeah? Could you imagine living your life in a desert and trekking out of the desert looking for something different and then running up on the ocean? Did you invent the ocean? Hell no. The ocean is more vast than you can even conceive. But anyone can walk up to that shore and see the ocean. It doesn't belong to you. And this is what Shakyamuni is trying to say in the Lotus Sutra, is that you guys have mistaken that I've brought the ocean to you in the desert. What I'm asking for you is to get off your butt and go witness this ocean thing I'm talking about. I didn't invent it. But this is the mind-rattling thing that the lifespan chapter performs in the Lotus Sutra. This ocean isn't mine. This ocean has always been there. I'm pointing to it. But Maitreya and the other bodhisattvas were further perplexed by these words of the Buddha. Yeah, they were really stuck, right? So, on that note, we'll continue in the next one. But this is a really critical part, not only of the Lotus Sutra and of Buddhist teachings in general, but it's also a critical part of Nichiren's teaching to you and I. Nichiren is really digging into this why. We've all read the Lotus Sutra. Why is he digging into it so much? Because he's wanting to demonstrate this opening of the eye, this RenGe, this stuckedness, if I can make up that word, of our samsaric mind of thingifying everything, having to break free from that kind of identification to perceive something that far transcends it, and yet is the very engine from which it is created. This is the dividing line. This is the opening of the eyes, yeah? To go from a dream state to a reality state. This is what we do when we chant and use this mandala, this representation of this very thing that he's talking about right here, to experience it in our minds. That is Gohonzon. That is mandala. That is the teaching, right? Teaching, Lotus, Ego Peak, captured in a scroll to once again focus on opening our eyes, which is the Gohonzon. Got it? All right. Help us grow this channel, this Sangha, by liking and subscribing. You do tremendous. It's a propagation effort. It wakes up the algorithms in YouTube to say, people are actually interested, so let's offer this up more. It helps us grow, yeah? And that helps us propagate Nichiren's doctrines of Shakyamuni's Lotus Sutra, right? The method for self-enlightenment. So thank you for that effort. If you can, or if you'd like to, buy some of the ebooks, easily attainable through threefoldlotus.com, along with a bunch of free information on the course study page, yeah? Help you study, help you teach. And then there's the bookstore. I like print books, but most people these days seem to like the electronic books. Much easier to get a hold of, especially since many of we in this Sangha are all over the world. And so shipping, printed books can get pretty expensive. So ebooks make that much easier, right, to attain. And those of you who can and feel motivated, who go on Patreon or straight to PayPal, through the threefoldlotus.com site, there's lots of links. You can offer monetary donations, which are incredibly necessary to keep this effort going. They help this school continue to collect more materials, more research to offer to you guys, to talk about with you guys. So all of you, tremendous bodhisattvas, thank you. And in that regard, as a samsaric being, please take care of your health. Without your health, everything suffers. Yeah. So please keep your practice strong, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, you scared me, Chloe. She just dropped her butt on my foot. What a way to close this video. Anyway, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one, guaranteed. Bye for now.